The Galactic Empire had not known defeat in 10,000 cycles. Its fleets stretched across the stars in calculated precision. It did not negotiate. It erased. Civilizations were consumed not by fire, but by silence. They vanished. There were no treaties, no debates. Submission or extinction. That was the rule. Among the outer territories, a new species was detected. Bipedal. Oxygen breathers. Isolated on a blue planet with one moon. Intelligence level, borderline. Technology, inconsistent. Biological structure, inefficient. Socio-political systems, fragmented. Recommendation, absorb and repurpose. The Empire had done it countless times before. This was routine. A standard assimilation directive was dispatched. A survey ship entered orbit, transmitted Imperial protocol, and waited. No reply. It repeated the message. Still nothing. On the third attempt, a response arrived. Audio only. No encryption, no protocol, just raw sound. Laughter. It wasn't static. It wasn't interference. It was deliberate. Human laughter. Empire officials reviewed the clip. No translation needed. They understood it. The sound pierced formality. There were no coordinates, no demands, just mockery. At first, Command considered it a provocation. Then a mistake. Perhaps a cultural glitch. But the laughter repeated. It was sent again, this time layered over what analysts later identified as Earth music. Analysts were ordered to decode the message structure. They concluded there was none. It wasn't a code. It was a statement. The admiral in charge of the local sector, Krizak of the Sixth Mind, ordered a fleet movement. 10 warships. 3 capital-class carriers. 2 orbital scorchers. They would enter Sol System, broadcast the final ultimatum, and begin planetary correction. Orders were issued without ceremony. No resistance was expected. None had ever lasted longer than a solar rotation. Reports from the front changed the tone. Scout drones approaching Mars encountered signal disruption. Not military jamming. Earth broadcasts. One drone received a message containing nothing but synthesized speech repeating a phrase from an old Earth film, identified later as comedy. Another drone was overwhelmed by transmissions of high-frequency sound and erratic data pulses. The patterns were chaotic. Humans were broadcasting noise. Or perhaps it wasn't noise. Perhaps it was a language the Empire did not understand. Central Command reviewed the history of the species. Violence saturated their past. Wars waged over belief, land, resources. But what stood out was not destruction. It was resilience. After every collapse, they rebuilt. After every war, they advanced. They didn't adapt slowly like others. They leapt. They failed often. But they never stopped. That behavior was not strategic. It was instinctual. One alien sociologist, assigned to analyze primitive species, made a formal report. It detailed a trend in human culture. Their myths celebrated resistance. Their heroes did not conquer, they rebelled. They fought overwhelming forces and lost, then fought again. Their stories weren't about dominance. They were about persistence. The Council reviewed the report and filed it under psychological anomalies. The fleet continued its approach. As Earth's rotation brought night to its major continents, something changed. Radio silence ended. Human networks activated globally. Military assets repositioned. Orbital defenses came online. Their systems were not standard. Their technology was mismatched, improvised. But it functioned. And it was coordinated. Defense satellites reactivated. Communication arrays shifted focus. Nations that had long distrusted each other began sharing data. There were no central commands. Just distributed resilience. The Empire had expected chaos. What it encountered was organized defiance. Empire commanders monitored Earth's response with growing confusion. There were no formal declarations. No transmission of surrender. Just fragmented signals, human voices discussing logistics, science, targeting coordinates. Then came the music. Broadcast across open frequencies. Songs. Rhythms. Laughter mixed with defiance. No plea. No apology. The final trigger was the message sent directly to the fleet's lead vessel. Translated easily. 7 words. You sure you want to do this? The fleet held position near the edge of the system. Some captains dismissed it as a bluff. Others weren't so sure. This was not a desperate species. This was something else. Something unwritten in imperial doctrine. The Empire had encountered rebellion. It had seen panic, fury, pride. But it had never faced a species that welcomed war with a grin. No species had laughed. Until now. The fleet arrived in orbit above Luna with formation tight and weapons primed. 10 Imperial dreadnoughts, flanked by escort frigates, each vessel larger than the human cities mapped days prior. Their approach was not stealthy. It was intentional, overwhelming by design. The humans did not hide. Their ships emerged slowly from Earth's shadow, smaller, less symmetrical, metallic constructs with exposed piping, radiation shielding, irregular hulls. To Imperial sensors, they looked unrefined. Primitive. Vulnerable. Standard protocol dictated immediate planetary suppression. The command was issued. Target their communication hubs. Disable orbitals. Force surrender through demonstration. As the Empire's lead vessels locked weapons, every targeting system flashed red. Malfunction. Then static. Then sound. A distorted voice played across the fleet's wideband frequencies. A human voice. Calm. Clear. Try again. Empire crews scrambled. Diagnostics ran clean. Sensors began to flicker. External readings inverted. Distances miscalculated. The human ships had done something not seen before. A form of electronic warfare, but adaptive. Living code. The Imperial network, believed unbreachable, was now uncertain. Audio returned on all channels, now layered with a rhythmic beat, a pattern unfamiliar to the Empire, but known on Earth as base. Human ships advanced. Still no formal formation. Their movements were erratic, hard to track. Then weapons fired, not lasers, not plasma. Physical projectiles, moving at relativistic speeds. No heat signature, no energy trace, just mass accelerated through raw physics. One Empire frigate was torn in half before it could raise its shields. The debris struck another vessel. Chain reaction. The formation broke. Command recalibrated. Orders were screamed. Focus fire on the closest human cruiser. A formation of 3 converged, locked their ion cannons, and fired. The human vessel vanished from sight just before impact. Then reappeared above the Empire's central command ship. It had not cloaked. It had repositioned using some gravitational slingshot from Earth's upper atmosphere. The move was suicidal. And effective. The cruiser released a swarm. Thousands of microdrones spread in clouds, forming blurs across Imperial scanners. They moved too fast for interception. Each one carried electromagnetic pulse charges. The Empire's bridge decks dimmed. Screens flickered. Manual override engaged. Tactical visuals lost. Communications collapsed. A second voice entered the comms. Human again. This one younger. Laughing. You guys bring lasers to a physics fight? Another capital ship exploded. No warning. Hull breach. Internal detonation. Not from human weapons, but from within. The command log would later reveal the ship's fire suppression system had been spoofed to flood its reactor core. The hack was undetected. Human cyber intrusion had bypassed protocols entirely. Empire survivors reported chaotic movement, unpredictability, no pattern. Human vessels did not retreat when damaged. One ship, on fire and venting oxygen, rammed into an Empire command carrier while broadcasting ancient Earth rock music. The carrier's hull ruptured, exposed to vacuum. The remaining Empire fleet attempted to regroup. Escape trajectory plotted. As engines spooled, Earth's moon shifted in their path. Or rather, what appeared to be the moon. Human engineers had launched decoys, massive heat-reflecting panels forming lunar silhouettes. The ships realigned. Then came the final attack. A coordinated launch from Earth's surface fired kinetic rods from orbital elevators. Unpowered. No propulsion. Just rods of tungsten dropped from near space, guided only by gravity and mathematics. 3 Empire ships were struck directly. No energy shields could stop them. They punctured armor like it was soft alloy. The surviving vessels fled. There was no transmission. No closing statement. Just silence from the humans. Hours later, the Empire broadcast a loss report. 42% fleet damage. 7 ships destroyed. No confirmed human casualties. In the debrief, one officer described the enemy with no military terminology. They played. They fought like they were enjoying it. No one spoke after that. The retreat from Seoul was not officially acknowledged. The Empire redacted the event from public records, citing navigational anomalies and tactical repositioning. Internally, it was labeled a Class Red encounter. This classification had not been used in over 3,000 cycles. Damage reports were sanitized. Survivor logs were sealed. But silence did not stop the ripple. Whispers spread. Commanders in distant sectors requested tactical briefings on human countermeasures. Data access was denied. The logic was administrative, admitting vulnerability undermined control. But commanders weren't blind. Entire fleets did not scatter without reason. And the fragments that returned showed evidence of something the Empire feared more than rebellion: competence. Analysis units dissected sensor logs. Debris from lost ships revealed strange structural damage, caused by weapons no doctrine accounted for. Manual analysis flagged human combat behavior as not just unpredictable, but intentionally chaotic. Their attack patterns changed mid-conflict. Their maneuvers disobeyed standard formations. Ships operated without centralized control, reacting as if each captain was improvising based on moment-to-moment instinct. Yet the chaos worked. Every action aligned with broader objectives. Some in the Empire considered this luck. Others suspected a deeper principle. Empire battle doctrine emphasized optimization. Predictability ensured cohesion. But humans leveraged asymmetry. They didn't just tolerate disorder, they wielded it. No single leader issued absolute commands. Their fleet behaved more like an organism than a hierarchy, each part informed, adaptive, independent. An internal task force was assigned to study human strategic culture. What they discovered unsettled even the most hardened analysts. Humanity did not evolve in safety. Their planet was hostile. Their history violent. Every advancement came under pressure. Their strategic doctrine wasn't built around strength. It was built around never assuming safety. They trained to fight while losing. Empire simulations failed to account for that mindset. Every model assumed eventual compliance once overwhelming force was shown. Humans didn't comply. They escalated. Faster, bolder, with no apparent regard for proportionality. The more pressure applied, the more inventive they became. Imperial psychological models were reviewed. They had misunderstood human motivation. Fear did not trigger withdrawal, it triggered action. Loss was not paralyzing, it was galvanizing. Defeat wasn't deterrent, it was familiar, and in many ways, expected. The average human soldier, data showed, had a cultural framework where loss was a beginning, not an end. Empire intelligence proposed a second incursion. A more precise strike, aimed at industrial and command centers. Strategic targeting. Suppression through attrition. But 2 core obstacles remained. First, location ambiguity. Earth's command infrastructure was obscured. Encryption changed daily. Network topologies shifted. Data centers were mobile. No central system could be mapped with certainty. Humans had deliberately scattered their digital core. They didn't protect a single node. They made everything a node. Destroying one changed nothing. Second, morale variance. Human morale, unlike in other species, increased under threat. Surveillance of public channels revealed that news of the Empire's approach had not caused panic. It had triggered collaboration. Rival states merged defense protocols. Civilian volunteers flooded technical support hubs. Military recruitment spiked. Popular media glorified resistance. Children were taught orbital mechanics alongside history. War had become a unifier. In an unclassified observation, one Imperial analyst noted that humans did not see the Empire as a force of terror, but as a challenge. A rival to test themselves against. Not in arrogance, but in curiosity. They wanted to see if they could win, not because they believed they would, but because trying was the point. Further investigation into human culture exposed a final anomaly. Their humor. Laughter persisted even during wartime broadcasts. Soldiers joked under fire. Pilots renamed weapons with absurd titles. Code written for defense systems contained embedded sarcasm in comments. Humor wasn't a coping mechanism, it was part of their operational mindset. In situations where other species shut down under pressure, humans unlocked new levels of performance. In high-level meetings, the word contagion was used. The fear was no longer human strength, it was human thinking. If other species observed humanity and found inspiration rather than terror, imperial dominance might fray. An idea, not a fleet, posed the real threat. And ideas, once spread, could not be recalled. The Empire's fears shifted from military to ideological. The concern was no longer just about weapons or tactics, it was about influence. Other civilizations watched. The broadcast records of Earth's defiance had leaked beyond containment. Alien observers, long under Imperial control, began to ask questions. Why had the humans survived? Why had they not surrendered? Why had the mighty fleet turned back? To prevent escalation, the Empire intensified control over border systems. Censorship was enforced. Independent transmissions were blocked. Educational archives were purged of recent incidents. New doctrines were circulated, reinforcing the myth of imperial infallibility. Internally, this approach showed cracks. Species that once complied with minimal oversight now required constant enforcement. Rebellions didn't start, but tensions sharpened. Empire analysts proposed cultural suppression campaigns. They blamed human defiance on psychological instability, on an evolutionary anomaly. They framed it as dangerous irrationality, not resilience. But the data didn't align. Earth's development showed consistent patterns of innovation under pressure. There was no randomness, just unfamiliar strategy. Meanwhile, humans expanded. Not through colonization, but through cooperation. Stations that were once isolated started broadcasting open signals. Translation protocols were shared freely. Resource management software was posted publicly across alien-accessible networks. Humans didn't posture as liberators. They offered tools. Some species hesitated. Others downloaded. Quiet alliances formed, not through treaties, but through systems integration. Human platforms began showing up in non-human infrastructure. Optimization algorithms. Defensive code. Medical simulations. Each adoption weakened the Empire's control over information. And none of it was officially declared. Diplomatic outreach failed. The Empire attempted to initiate formal communication with Earth, offering conditional agreements. The response was brief. We don't sign away choices. It wasn't rebellion. It was refusal. Within human systems, there was no desire to conquer. No effort to dictate interstellar norms. They didn't want control, they wanted parity. What unsettled the Empire was that humans didn't view them as unique. They treated them as just another problem to solve. Attempts to exploit internal human divisions also failed. Disinformation campaigns were deployed, false threats, simulated betrayals, mimicked voices. Human intelligence identified and countered each one with stunning speed. One Empire operative embedded in a planetary news channel was exposed within 72 hours. Rather than quietly remove the agent, humans released the full transcript of every intercepted message. They didn't just reveal the breach, they made it public. Humiliation as a deterrent. Strategically, the Empire faced a problem it was never designed for, an opponent not seeking dominance. Human victory didn't look like occupation or expansion. It looked like independence. Worse, it looked sustainable. The humans weren't exhausting resources to win. They were integrating survival into their structure. In military circles, the concept of human persistence protocols became a subject of urgent study. These were not centralized defense plans, but distributed systems with self-replicating contingencies. Earth had no capital to target, no leader to remove, no archive that wasn't backed up fivefold across different solar orbits. An attack on one point only rerouted control to another. Empire war doctrine lost effectiveness. Each standard playbook was met with unorthodox resistance. Supply chain sabotage with non-lethal tactics. Signal interference using abstract art patterns converted into pulse jamming. At one battlefront, human drones broadcast lullabies that caused disruption in Empire crew focus cycles. No pattern repeated. No tactic returned. In private discussions, high-ranking Empire officials debated one final option: total planetary sterilization. The logic was cruel but familiar: remove the anomaly before it spreads. But hesitation surfaced. Not from morality, but from doubt. What if failure was irreversible? What if the humans survived that too? Worse, what if others followed them? The fear was no longer of human power. It was of human permanence. Of a species that did not need to win battles to win influence. Of minds that turned pressure into possibility. The Empire had mastered domination. But they had never learned how to compete. Within the central chambers of the Empire's high directive, silence reigned. Reports were no longer discussed. They were reviewed with a shared discomfort. Words like anomaly, deviance, and threat had given way to a newer term whispered behind closed doors: precedent. Humanity had become more than a military issue. It was a living contradiction to the Empire's foundational logic. The model was no longer working. Attempts to contain the ideological spread failed. The more the Empire tightened control, the more its subjects looked outward. What began as questions turned into quiet imitation. Minor planetary systems modified their education protocols. Engineers borrowed human interface design. Entire scientific councils began referencing Earth research methods. Human models emphasized failure tolerance, decentralized control, and adaptive response. Ideas the Empire had long discarded now re-emerged in foreign hands. Worse still, enforcement responses were met not with fear but quiet defiance. Patrol vessels sent to reassert control over these systems encountered unexpected resistance, not direct, but systemic. Infrastructure became harder to navigate. Systems rerouted without authorization. Information moved without trace. Civilian populations feigned compliance while operating independently beneath the surface. Influence no longer needed fleets. Human systems did not announce their expansion. No territorial claims, no ideological declarations. They simply extended presence, through data, through trade, through shared tools. They uplifted others without fanfare. Species under Imperial watch began using Earth's open-source communication suites, satellite routing software, autonomous agricultural algorithms. All free. No strings. The Empire's economy, once rooted in enforced scarcity, found itself bypassed. Some Empire species attempted to return to loyalty, requesting intervention against rising Earth sympathies. But intervention exposed more. In each case, records showed the humans had not recruited, they had simply helped. A failing reactor had been stabilized using a human-supplied cooling protocol. A colony's drought had ended after implementing a water collection method shared in a public archive. Empire intelligence reviewed thousands of such cases. Aid had been given quietly, with no credit demanded. Human fleets remained small. Military buildup was modest. No planetary expansion took place. Their power didn't grow vertically, it spread laterally, peer-to-peer, system to system. Their strategy wasn't conquest. It was continuity. They won not through fear, but through trust. And that trust, once seeded, grew faster than occupation ever had. The Empire's last option was narrative control. Massive resources were allocated to rewrite history. Archive manipulation was intensified. Human actions were reframed as temporary success stories that would ultimately collapse. Artificial crises were manufactured to distract from Earth's influence. But facts kept leaking. Small discrepancies, impossible to erase entirely, chipped away at the story. Memory could not be fully controlled when truth was distributed. Eventually, an unofficial delegation of mid-tier Empire officials reached out. No formal agreement. No treaty. A meeting request. Not with Earth's leaders, but with their scientists. They didn't seek surrender. They asked for cooperation on a resource optimization issue their own systems had failed to solve. The request wasn't granted. It was shared, openly, publicly, with solutions crowdsourced across the human network and returned within days. That moment was decisive. Not militarily, not economically. Culturally. For the first time, the Empire had depended on an outside species and received help without subjugation. The transaction was clean, respectful, and absolute. And it worked. Other systems followed. Requests increased. Data flowed. Trust became systemic. Earth didn't rise through rebellion. It rose through relevance. Its defiance had never been centered on destruction, it had been built on proving a different kind of order. In time, the Empire's grip loosened. Not by war, but by erosion. Its fleets still existed. Its leaders still ruled. But its influence dimmed with each quiet act of autonomy inspired by humanity. Control collapsed without collapse. The final classified report written by the Empire's Internal Advisory Board was short. Just 7 words. The humans never fought us. They taught us.